Oh, and can you give me a test?
Yeah. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Wonderful.
I'm sitting on my coattails. I hear that the suit doesn't. If it's
No, no, you're good. All right, ready and we're streaming.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to my semi-regular, more regular now, program Speaking Moistly. With me today, as usual, is John Carpay. John, how are you today?
Hey, glad to be with you, Mark. I'm doing well, enjoying the beautiful fall colors. Just had a nice Thanksgiving weekend behind me, and some good times with family and friends. So
Yeah,
there is, in spite of Canada going to hell in a handbasket, there is actually a lot still to be grateful for. We
it's
still have a lot more free speech than in the United Kingdom. We've got a lot of good inertia and remnants from our heritage of freedom that are still with us that we can still use. So we do have a lot to be grateful for, actually.
I agree there, and yeah, my Thanksgiving was also really nice. We had a really good one. The family everybody was just firing on all cylinders. It was nice to see everybody. Everybody was in fine form. So, but yeah, you mentioned we still have more free speech than the United Kingdom, and I agree with you. And I think the only reason we have more free speech than the United Kingdom is because the United Kingdom doesn't have that enshrined in, for whatever reason. They started with the Magna Carta in the 1200s or whatever, and our laws are based on their laws. But we have that thing in the charter that says free expression under things people would find in a democracy, whatever, under that caveat. But free expression is paramount. It's the first thing. And again, in the United States as well, they've got the First Amendment and then the Second Amendment, which is supposed to support the First Amendment, so I hear. So ours is more enshrined in that written law and more up to date. And the British police are just showing up at people's houses. I fear that with C2, C8, and C9, Canada is going to have almost exactly the same thing happen. And I saw your viral video. I watched it and I thought, this is terrifying. Was it a worst case scenario you were laying out, or is this just kind of what the bill says?
Well, it's the direction that we're walking in now. And by the way, I hate to disagree with you, but I think culture is king. I think the reason that the freedom of speech is in terrible shape in the United Kingdom, it's not because they have or do not have a charter, or their constitution has or does not have specific words. It's not because of that. It's just the slow erosion of a culture of freedom, whereby previously people understood. It all depends on culture. Like you think back to Canada before 1982, before the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms was added to our constitution, right? We already had constitution, other parts to our constitution that still exist. So before that was added, if you were accused of a crime, the police would respect your right to remain silent, to not issue a statement. You were presumed to be innocent until proven guilty.
Mm-hmm.
It was presupposed you had a right to a fair trial before an independent and impartial tribunal. Why was that? And it wasn't practiced perfectly. We've had miscarriages of justice, but the reason why that was respected by the police and the Crown prosecutors and the judges and members of the public was because it was so deeply entrenched in our culture that you're innocent until proven guilty and you have a right to a fair trial, etc. That was part of our culture. Then the charter came along and it entrenched, and it said, now we've got specifically charter sections 8, 9, 10, 11. You've got specific, there's no double jeopardy. You can't get prosecuted a second time over the same thing. You have a right to counsel. You have a right to be free from unreasonable search and seizure. It's all in the charter. Hasn't helped us or harmed us. It's the culture that matters. So in Canada, we had, and in Britain, in 1982, in Canada, we had this very strongly entrenched sense that everybody knew that we're a free country, and in a free country, you can say what you want, and people can disagree with you, but we're not going to lock you up in jail. We're not going to prosecute you because we have free speech. Mm-hmm. It was so part of our culture, and it was in the United Kingdom as well. What's happened is we've got this cultural erosion. It's been gradual. It's been going on, since the 80s, 1980s, that there are fewer and fewer Canadians really appreciate that we do have freedom of expression. Mm-hmm. And so we've got these bad ideas that, well, yeah, you can have free speech as long as it doesn't hurt somebody else's feelings. It's like, no, it doesn't work. Or you can have free speech as long as you don't say something that somebody else finds offensive. It's like, no, freedom of speech is worthless if it doesn't include the right to tell people what they don't want to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
well, and that's the crux of it.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I'm rambling on way too long, but my point is that the culture in the UK has declined to this point where people are getting locked up in jail because they have objected to immigration policies with, unwise language. Like I think in the United Kingdom, you could probably still say, I disagree with current immigration policies. But, if you're not careful and it's something about, these blankety blank immigrants are ruining our culture and they shouldn't be getting free hotel. Like if your language is a bit flamboyant or vociferous or in your face, if you got some really blunt speech, well, you get police knocking on your door and you spend time in jail.
Yes.
It's terrible.
As we saw with Lucy Connolly and some others who were told to plead guilty to these charges and then they got put in jail. So do you think I have this feeling that if they start trying to lock me up, even if I aggressively disagree, and I think that what you were kind of describing is aggressively disagreeing. I don't know that I'd use mean words necessarily, like, these people, but just saying migrants or, using the wrong term for them, the wrong term that they don't like, they could say that's hateful. And if somebody decided to lock me up for my opinion on my show that I've been doing for years and years now, I think that the Canadian public would be upset about that. And not like, you can't lock up Mark, not like that. I think that if they took somebody like me, then the public would be upset. And it would be more broad than just me. It would be people like me. You know what I mean? It would be it would be Rebel News. The government has already indicated that they were trying to remove Rebel News from being able to attend certain events and things like that. So if Rebel News was the target and not me, necessarily, then people would not tolerate that. And I feel strong, I agree with your argument, but I don't know how that, I feel like the people who are putting this forward know damn well what the culture is, and they don't care. They're trying to change the culture. And so they've got a plan for how to deal with this bubbling up of public backlash when they go after these, like when it comes to the next step. In England, they've arrested 12,000 people or something like that. They're having real problems with it. Do you think they're going to have difficulties implementing this, or do you think Canada will go quietly into that good night?
I don't want to predict the future, but it's up to us. We protect our freedom of expression by exercising our freedom of expression. The worst thing that any Canadian can do is self-censorship, where we don't, frankly, speak our minds on issues. That's a danger, because if everybody self-censors, and then this culture of fear becomes more prevalent, and it's easier. The noose gets tighter and tighter. Okay.
Yep.
So you see that, for example, with Bill C-9. Okay, it worsens the existing hate speech provisions that have already been on the books for 30 years. It's been a criminal code offense in Canada for 30 years or longer, actually. I have to look up when the legislation was passed. But willfully promoting hatred against a group that can be identified on the basis of race, ancestry, ethnicity, sex, gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, religion, age. There's a list of grounds. You can willfully promote hatred against people for not getting injected with COVID vaccine, or you could willfully promote hatred against. Well, no, that would be a religion. That would be, in theory, that would be prohibited.
The conservatives were saying that the Christians were explicitly excluded from C9. They were Islamophobia, anti-Semitism.
Anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, transphobia, homophobia.
Yeah, right. These were all specifically done. But the conservatives were upset, and I think legitimately so. I don't think it was an illegitimate thing. They were saying, why were Christians not included in this list? If people are burning down Christian churches, Catholic churches, is that not hatred? Is that not a hate-motivated thing? And I think the Liberals do what they usually do. They didn't answer the question. So it's a valid criticism.
It's a point I've made myself. Now, that's not technically in the legislation itself, but it was interesting and I think very relevant that when the Justice Minister, Sean Fraser, announced Bill C-9, he said there's rising anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, homophobia, transphobia. Therefore, we're going to bring in this bill ostensibly to protect the access of people going into their place of worship and other facilities that are related to a prohibited ground of discrimination. It was kind of vague, but I guess if you're walking into the Turkish Cultural Center or walking into a temple, mosque, synagogue, or something, but this is deceptive because it's already illegal to physically block access to a place.
Yep.
If you're trying to get into your car or into your house or into your church or whatever, if you're trying to get from point A to point B, if I physically block you, if I stand in your way, even if I don't touch you, if I physically obstruct you, prevent you from getting into your car, house of worship, house of residence, that's criminal conduct. If I threaten you, it's criminal conduct. So this is already a crime to impede access to a house of worship. But But the minister didn't mention, Christian churches burned to the ground, so dozens of them, and that's just not mentioned, right? It's only anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, transphobia, homophobia.
Yeah, well, and we, as you clearly laid out. Sorry, my earphones keep getting tied up on my microphone here. As you clearly laid out, people who are impeding your ability to get into a building or something like that are committing a crime, yet the police don't seem to care. If you've got the right flag, if you're waving the Canadian flag, hold on a second, they're going to bring out the horses. But if you've got a Palestinian flag, for example, then they won't enforce the law. They won't even. I mean, they'll give the Palestinian protesters a police escort, and that's weird, right? Like that seems strange.
So it's a double standard, and I've seen the video of. And by the way, I support the right to pray in public for anybody of any faith. If you're on a public sidewalk, in a public park, if you want to pray, you can pray. You cannot obstruct the streets with your prayer. And you see these Muslims obstructing a street by praying in the street, and that was condoned by police.
I was going to say, that's not hate. That's not hate, right? Nobody's going to use nobody's going to use those laws to stop the Muslims from protesting in the streets, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a little bit of a different. I don't think that the hate speech laws really apply to that. But what I'm talking about is a double standard in prosecutions. So if you are Tamara Leach or Chris Barber and you're protesting against lockdowns, and the judge finds that there was some obstruction of some streets and there were some Ottawa residents that had trouble going into or out of their homes. I guess maybe if you live in an apartment building and you've got underground parking and the cars coming out, there was some obstruction of some people in the lawful use and enjoyment of their property, so they get a criminal conviction. But the Muslims praying on the Toronto streets don't even get prosecuted in the first place. Yep. Or you had the Aboriginals in Manitoba protesting against residential schools, and they tear down and vandalize a statue of Queen Victoria.
No charges.
With police watching in broad daylight.
Yep.
And there's no prosecution.
Yep.
And you get the burning of churches, and I have no idea. Maybe they've tried really, really, really hard to find out what caused the arson. I don't know. But so far, I haven't heard of anybody being prosecuted for that, which could be, just to be fair, it could be that they have tried sincerely. They've tried really, really hard and just haven't been able to find the arsonists. Okay, it's possible.
Yeah.
But double standard is alive and well in Canada for prosecutions.
They spent a lot of money going after Tamara and Chris Barber, right? Tamara Lich and Chris Barber, and they're not spending a lot of money going after the people who are tearing down statues. And I feel strongly that the people who, going back to 2017, 2018, when there were rail line blockades, people were lighting things on fire on railroad tracks. I know people whose job it was. Like I know people who have retired from their job at the railroad. There are police whose only job is the railroad. If you light something on fire, I remember being a kid and putting pennies on the track, and the guy on the he had a truck, but the truck had wheels and rails, so he could drive along the train tracks. And he saw us putting the pennies on the track, and he gave us a talking to. He's like, "You could derail this train. You can't do this kind of stuff." We used to just squish pennies. right? And he like, we still,
That's fun.
it is fun. We still put the pennies on there, but he's like, don't put too many too close together. We were like, okay. He's like, you don't want any accidents. I was like, sure we don't. We were like 9, right? Like young. So, but it's very interesting that they didn't want pennies on the track when I was 9, and flaming debris, no arrests, right? The flaming debris groups were ignored and supported by the police, which shouldn't have happened. But then they morphed into all of the crazy the Black Lives Matters, and then now it's the pro-Palestinian. And I think they're all the same protest. I think it's all the same thing. I feel like they're being used to destabilize our society, and the government is looking the other way because that benefits the government. So they say, well, this helps us, so we'll just leave them alone. I could be wrong about that, but it feels like that when I'm looking at this as a citizen.
These are symptoms of a gradual takeover of the neo-Marxist woke ideology that has this narrative that society is perpetual conflict between oppressors and oppressed. Yep. And so the old Marxism, which, after decades was just not catching on and people were not really embracing it. People, rejected it in the Soviet Union. Ultimately, there was enough opposition to bring down that system, but it didn't gain traction in Canada, the United States, Western Europe. The old Marxist narrative was that you had the capitalist oppressors, and then you had the oppressed working class, the proletariat. Mm-hmm. Now, the neo-Marxism doesn't talk about capitalists and bourgeoisie or capitalists and workers, but it's the same basic narrative that men are oppressing women, light-skinned people are oppressing dark-skinned people, straight people are oppressing gay people, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. And so there's this perpetual oppression. Mm-hmm. And this ideology, the old Marxism, the new Marxism, they negate the importance of every individual. They disagree with the idea that we can find unity based on our common humanity, mm-hmm. or some would say we're all created in the image of God, so we are fundamentally different from animals. We're created from the image of God. Or for the atheists, wouldn't talk about created in the image of God, but they would say we have this common humanity, mm-hmm. that we are people. And so the woke neo-Marxist ideology rejects that common humanity, and it says, no. What really matters is your sex and your skin color, your sexual proclivities. That's what really matters, mm-hmm. and not that we're first and foremost human beings.
Yes.
So this ideology has infiltrated our culture, is promoted on a daily basis certainly by the CBC, which is not media. It's a taxpayer-funded advocacy group is what the CBC is, 1.4 billion per year to advocate for this woke ideology. Yes. Permeates everything. So that's the problem, is the culture has been infiltrated. And then from the culture, the judiciary, the law societies, the law schools, the judges, the
Supreme Court, I would even argue.
Yeah, the Supreme Court. So that's what we're up against. And, we do have enough freedom of expression left to fight it and to peacefully remove it from all of our institutions. Because that's what's driving, the double standard in prosecutions. That's why you get, the Crown aggressively prosecuting Tamara Leach and Chris Barber, while the Crown will turn a blind eye to churches being burned to the ground or Aboriginals vandalizing statues in broad daylight.
Yeah. You seem sure, and I hope that your confidence is well founded. And I mean, I hope that we start to see it turn. We're kind of starting to see it turn. There are indications here and there, but then, entire school boards across the entire country are pushing SOGI. There are a whole bunch of cultural, if this was a war, and you say the judiciary and the police and the not just the judiciary, but the legislative branch, all of these institutions have been infiltrated. I would say we don't have a CBC that's pushing for families, and we should have a tax structure where only one person needs to work, and you can have food and vacations and education with on that one salary. Like if we had a network that was talking about that was playing Leave It to Beaver, like father knows best, sure, right? But there's no balance, and it just seems I don't know how we're going to regain that kind of lost ground.
Well, bit by bit, incrementally. I mean, we've lost it bit by bit. We've had too much trust in government by too many people, and it was a huge mistake to have abdicated. For parents, starting in the 60s and 70s and 80s, for parents to abdicate responsibility for educating their children to total strangers, this is a choice, or for parents to not be involved. I read an article just recently about how with the lockdowns and the school closures, that there's a lot of women that didn't return to the workforce. Yeah. But one of the things you heard about is that parents, when you had lockdowns, and then parents got a look at, because they had to, because the kids are suddenly at home because they closed the schools. Yep. So you got parents that are usually out working, the mom, the dad, both, whatever. You got the parents who are at home. Parents for the first time are looking at the garbage that is being given to the children that our children are exposed to, which pre-lockdowns parents hadn't seen that they're actively pushing this unproven notion that mankind controls the Earth's climate, putting that forward as an absolute incontrovertible fact, as opposed to a theory that has supporters and opponents. Pushing forward as an absolute fact that a boy can become a girl and a girl can become a boy, and that it's all based on feelings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're pushing all of this stuff, and parents woke up to it. And so, but there's an example, right? Like we got into this mess ourselves by not paying attention to what our own kids are learning at school.
Well, yeah, but there's social pushes and pulls as well. Like in the 1980s, there was a big shift from single income families to double income families. I grew up during that period. I was born in 1981, so I watched that shift. You know what I mean? And so I hear with you, and I agree. Or I hear and agree with what you're saying for a lot of it. But there are also societal pressures that push people. And I mean, like in the 80s, people didn't know. They didn't know what was going on in the schools because, like working was totally different than it is today. Like I think homework was totally different. Everything was totally different. I feel like our families and our culture are often the victims of seemingly innocuous changes in policy that most people don't understand. They made the change in 1987. I think it was 1987, Canada to become multicultural, right? Multiculturalism was the new name of the game, and nothing changed. And everybody was like, okay, well, this doesn't really have anything to do with me. Now, 2025, that impact you're really seeing the impact. In the early 80s, I remember the Lord's Prayer being said at the beginning of public school. We did O Canada, and we did the Lord's Prayer. And they removed that. And again, people didn't see the impact until decades later. You know what I mean? And so in that way, we're victims of these policies that trickle down, and we don't understand the impact today and how it's going to impact 10 years, 15 years on. And we can't go back in time and fix it. And if you try and make the case like, well, we should become more secular, we should become more religious, we should fix this way. Well, I mean, these days people will scream at you that you're trying to infringe on their right to be an atheist or something. You know what I mean? Like, we can't put that genie back in the bottle. Some people were saying we have to bake a new cake. Like, our culture is cooked, and we've eaten the cake. Now it's gone, and we're kind of standing around going, so men can be women. Like, we can't figure this out. Like, it's weird, man. It's a weird situation. And again, you're saying that we have ourselves to blame. And I feel like we're responding to stimuli that other people have a reasonable expectation of. They know there's going to be a fallout for this, but they do it anyway. And so I hear you, and I think that there's a balance. It's not 100% that we just walked with our eyes closed into this. There's a push and pull, I think. But sorry, Karen.
Yeah, I don't want to be overly harsh on anybody, if I had been an adult in the 50s or 60s when the government started to gradually take over, governments and most politicians of most parties, they promote this false idea that government somehow created and invented healthcare and governments created education. And then, until government became a lot bigger, like we didn't have healthcare, we didn't have education, we didn't have orphanages, we didn't have care for orphans and widows, we didn't have hospices for terminally ill people to obtain love and support and pain relief in their dying days. And it's completely false. We've had education and healthcare and all kinds of social services have been around for thousands of years. The only thing different in the last 50 years is the government has taken them over. Now, I don't want to be judgmental against like people in the 60s when government said, okay, well, we're going to take over healthcare. Government was not involved in healthcare, not in a big way. You had your colleges of physicians and surgeons to licensed doctors, but basically people they paid for their medical insurance, or they paid for medical services, or whichever. You paid for both your services or your insurance. Government wasn't involved. Well, government totally took it over. Government took over education, which had been managed by churches for centuries, and government came in and took it over. And with this big lie that we're giving you all this free money. Well, no, the money was, people were already paying the money. It's just that government took it over and said, we're going to raise your taxes and we're going to spend the money, and government got in the way. So what's happened was, when government first starting in the 60s and continuing onwards, when governments took over healthcare and education, social services, orphanages, old age homes, like nursing homes, long-term care facilities, special care for handicapped people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When government first took these things over, it didn't come across as a terrible thing because government was not imposing woke neo-Marxist values on the hospitals, the schools, the universities, the orphanages, everything else. But what happened was, first government took over, and then 20, 30, 40 years later, government starts to say, oh, well, you might be a hospice in British Columbia that was created and established for the purpose of caring for dying people who don't want to commit suicide. They want to die. They want to have painkillers, but they don't want to commit suicide. And the BC government shuts down the hospice and says, well, you must provide the option of suicide to people, and you have to actively promote that. You have to ask everybody, hey, do you want to commit suicide? Because we can get a doctor to help you do that. And they're like, well, we don't want to do that. But now another government's taken over, and so they impose their ideology. And I'm sorry for being long-winded, but in a nutshell, it's that government takeover that leaves us very vulnerable. So what do? Well, we have to recreate and take back. We have to establish our own schools and universities and hospitals and everything ourselves, and not have the taxpayer funding.
Yeah, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a tough go.
It's going to be hard, very hard.
People just people believe in the school system, even though the school system will lie to your children about certain things to align with hate legislation or whatever it is. They will tell a version of the story that doesn't resemble the truth, in my opinion. So let's bring it back just a little bit. Do you think that we are going to, I don't want you to predict the future, but based on what's going on now, do you think that the government is it looks like they're going to try and ram these bills through, C8, C9, C2. And I think that they have the Senate votes to get it royal assent. I think that they could, if they wanted to ram them through, you were the ones saying by Christmas we could have a police state. They could ram it through by Christmas. I could believe it. I don't know that it'd have royal assent by Christmas, like by Christmas vacation. I don't know that officers would be knocking on our doors, but I think that it would be in process, and by January of 26, certainly plausible. Do you think that's likely, or do you think that it's going to be derailed? As I said, England's having some issues with it. The Keir Starmer is getting pushback, and a lot of people are trying to say they want an election, but that's nothing new for Starmer because he's a globalist puppet. So, do you think we're going to get better, or do you think it's going to be Just no crystal ball, just gut check.
Well, we risk being a police state by Christmas 2025. So in another, where are we, mid-October, so in another 2 months and 2 weeks, we could be a police state in Canada if these bills go through unaltered. Since I recorded that video, which last I looked had over 200,000 views, the federal government has, and I'm not done my research on this. I'm trying to find out what's happened. I've put in phone calls and emails to a bunch of different media, federal government media people. Is the government actually withdrawing Bill C2?
Yeah, I heard that.
Because the word on the street, let's just call it the word on the street, okay? And I'm still trying to figure out the veracity of it. But the word on the street is that the government has introduced Bill C12 to replace Bill C2. Bill C12, which I haven't gone through yet, it looks like Bill C2, but some of the bad parts seem to be missing. It seems to be missing the Canada Post can open letter mail without a warrant. It seems to be missing the provision that it's becomes a crime to use cash in amounts of 10,000 or more. It seems to have other bad aspects of Bill C2 that are not in it. And so my emails and phone calls to various federal government departments and their media relations departments and so on, communications departments, I'm asking do I understand correctly that Bill C2 is going to, if it's not formally withdrawn, is it at least being put on the back burner and it's just going to die a quiet death and you're not going to push it forward? Do I understand that correctly? Because if I do, then that shows just that the pushback did work, because there were enough Canadians that were opposed to Bill C2, the Strong Borders Act, which I've called I think it should be called the Strong Surveillance Act. But they do listen to this pushback up to if it's enough.
If it's enough. Yeah, I mean, I feel strongly, again, I have very strong feelings a lot of the time, which is why I do a daily show. But when Doug Ford announced that they were going to not allow people to use playgrounds, I was like, I will get arrested for this. F you, F this, get my ladder and get my clipper things. I'm going to cut down the swings if they dare to put them up. You can arrest me all day long. F you. There's no way I will put up with this. And I could feel other people feeling similar. And I feel the same way about C8, C9. I don't put up symbols for hate. I don't do this show to be hateful to people. I don't do my other show to be hateful to people. I do this show because I find it interesting to hear about what people think. And some people have controversial takes. Sometimes I have controversial takes, and we should be able to do that. And so I feel strongly that if they cross that line that they seem to cross with C2 and they have to correct it by taking out the bill and changing it and then reintroducing it, I feel strongly that a lot of people share my concerns and my commitment to be like, F this. I'm not gonna do what you want me to do in this situation. I'm going to rage against all of this nonsense. So I think that's a good answer. Like, if they did. So are you saying that you haven't heard back yet, or it looks like that's what's happened?
Well, that's, again, the word on the streets. That's what some media outlets were saying, that the Bill C12 was being brought in to replace C2 because there was so much pushback against Bill C2. It had so many terrible provisions, and so now C12 is less bad. And if that's true, it goes to show, I've been saying, and other people have been saying, contact your MP. I don't care if your MP is Liberal, Conservative, NDP, Bloc, or Green. Contact your MP and tell them to vote against Bill C2. And, even within the government, even within the Liberal Party, which does not have a majority in the House of Commons, so they have to tread with some caution. Even within the Liberal Party, there are Liberal MPs who have heard from their constituents that constituents are very unhappy with Bill C2. It does trickle up to the leadership, because a political party leader, they can ignore most of their MPs most of the time on most issues. However, when there's MPs that are saying, hey, I'm not going to get reelected in my riding if Bill C2 stays in its current form, when that word gets up to the Prime Minister and the Justice Minister and the other cabinet ministers, it makes a difference. And where's that coming from? It's coming from Canadians contacting their member of parliament.
Yeah, fair enough. I still, when I watch videos of Sean Fraser and all of these other people, they all seem very arrogant and they don't seem like they're listening. But if I would be okay if we don't get a full-blown police state in December. I would be fine with that. But we need to.
On Bill C8, I've heard through the grapevine that a lot of MPs are getting a lot of flack over Bill
Good.
C8 because it actually allows federal cabinet ministers to kick you off the internet and order a telecommunications service provider, which means any company that is providing your like your phone or your. Speaking of which, call from Ontario. That's probably one of the media people that I was contacting earlier this morning, calling me back. But so a federal cabinet minister can order your phone company or your internet provider to kick you off the internet, and they can make that order secret, and they can say this order shall remain secret. And if you violate the terms of that order, you can be liable for fines of up to $50,000 per day. $50,000 per day, which is enough to bankrupt most Canadians. And if you're a business, 15 million per day, maximum fine. So if Bill C8 becomes law, and if cabinet minister orders a particular Canadian, a specific Canadian, to get kicked off the internet, you can be pretty sure those companies are going to comply because they don't want to be fined $15 million for refusing to kick somebody off the internet. You're then left in a situation where theoretically you can go to court, but unless you've got an extra 100,000 sitting around that you have no need of, just spare change, spare cash that you can use for a lawsuit, unless you've got a spare 100,000 sitting around to start a court action, you're kind of stuck with being kicked off of the internet, kicked off of your telephone, and that has impact too for even your banking and grocery shopping. I'm not quite sure if it would be, completely analogous to the freezing of a bank account, but you might have a hard time if you're kicked off the internet. Like doing your banking might be if you're used to doing your banking online.
It would very much impact people in our modern world. There would certainly be massive impacts. And I mean, people would find a way around it. You'd go get a burner phone, you know what I mean? One where you don't have to give your name or anything like that. And so this is where the digital ID comes in, because then even if you have a burner phone and you can get on the internet, that now you need to verify your identity and all the rest of it, right? So it's all a very, very, it's very concerning. And again, I feel strongly that people have that same visceral reaction that I had during the COVID swing incident. I was like, nope, you can arrest me all you want, but I'm not putting up with this. And I hope that pushback reaches the upper echelon. And I mean, personally, I can't believe what's happening, because it seems like lockstep across the West. There seems to be all sorts of, like, England is doing this and Australia is doing this, and the whole United
apparently
Kingdom.
Italy is not.
Italy's,
it depends on it does depend on the government that is elected by the people. It depends on the culture. I mean, tyrants can try to impose their will from on high. Tyrants can only succeed when there's a willing populace, right? Tyrants need slaves, and slaves look to tyrants. And the more that we have awake, alert adults who are not these, pathetic losers that want government to tell them what to think and what to believe and how to behave and what to do, right? You have this. It's almost statolatry. It's like you have these government worshippers. Government's God, and government's going to give me a sense of meaning and purpose, and government's going to tell me what I should do with my life and how I should live my life, and I want government to do that. It's really sick. So those people are the problem, or that ideology is the problem. But if there's more people like you and me that are awake, alert, aware adults, we're not anarchists. We want government to be there for certain purposes, and got a criminal code, and if you murder somebody, you're going to get prosecuted, and if found guilty, you're going to be jailed, and whatever. There's a place, and government can build some roads and bridges if the private individuals can't get their act together to be able to do that. But we don't worship government. Okay, so slaves look to tyrants for this guidance and leadership, and tyrants need slaves because a tyrant cannot impose his will on a country that is full of awake, alert, aware adults. You can't impose tyranny on those people.
Yep. Well, which is why they try and infantilize us and keep us children and have us work jobs. And you know what I mean? I feel like our education has not been updated because it produces people who are waiting to be told by this entity that you're kind of describing. And so they have a very effective system there. They don't want to update it. And so it's concerning. I feel like we have a big battle ahead of us. And
we do.
There's hope.
We got more freedom. The fact that we're having this podcast right now, and the fact that there's been pushback against Bill C2, and I'm sure there is pushback against Bills C8 and C9, the fact that we're looking at the United Kingdom saying, well, it's terrible that thousands of people are getting jailed over their peaceful politically incorrect speech. It's a matter of being proactive and assuming responsibility and not getting into self-censorship, because that's the worst thing. Makes it easier for the bad guys to take our rights and freedoms away if we're not just exercising our freedoms.
Yep. No, I agree with you there. We're at 41 minutes. And we're doing this at an odd time, so I think this is a good time to bring it to an end. Do you have where can people find you? And last thoughts, final words.
So, final thought: contact your member of parliament, and I don't care what party he or she belongs to. Contact your MP. Say vote against bills C2, C8, C9. And that might change in the days ahead to C12. It's okay. They'll get the point. If you say vote against bills C2, C8, C9, they'll understand it's about privacy and free expression. And so that's extremely important. Contact your MP. And if you want to get in touch with the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, our website is www.jccf.ca. So Justice Center Constitutional Freedoms, jccf.ca. We've got an email newsletter that goes out once or twice a month. You could sign up for that and be kept informed of our all of our court actions all over Canada. And let's be grateful. We are grateful for our heritage of freedom, and we just got to put in some effort to preserve it. Yeah, and hopefully we will be able to continue it and pass it down to our kids in the next generation who are set to defend Canadian rights and freedoms. Fingers crossed. Anyway, thanks for joining me. Thanks for joining me today, John. And thanks for watching, everybody. And we'll